Hey, happy Tuesday morning. I'm going to be doing some mixing today in Pro Tools. I'm actually finishing up this record. I've been working on it for the last couple days. And it's been kind of a slow crawl because of the COVID thing. Just like letting my ears open back up and everything. But yeah, I wanted to kind of go live and just show you guys some of my process in Pro Tools, doing some mixing. Basically, the name of the game is always to beat the reference from the client. Client sends me a reference and says, look, this is as far as we could get it. I don't know where else to go with this. And then they pay me the big bucks, right? So that's what I'm doing today. I'm going to be jumping in. It's kind of a blues rock track with some really interesting kind of modern elements like 808s, sub basses, things like that. So it's kind of an interesting track to get to really like feel right and to hit big and to sound big and open up and everything. So yeah, let's get into it. Let's start diving into this thing. First of all, I'll just kind of break down the elements of the track for you guys. I'll play a little bit of the reference mix, kind of what I got from them. It's by Big Muzz. It's called Groovy Man. So it's kind of a fun track. I actually really like it. I've been enjoying mixing it. But here's kind of the mix reference that I got from them.
Strange as it was before. Grouping in, can't see us holding on. Grouping in, bound to bring some pressure in. Can unwind from all the trouble and hiding. So grouping in, won't you show us how you dare? Strange as it was before. Strange as it was before.
All right, so it's kind of the big things I noticed right away is like it is like this like kind of grooving blues rock, blues kind of vibe. So I want to make sure that I keep that, right? Like I'm really trying to keep the vibe of the track. So here's where I'm at. I'll just play you kind of where my mix is at right now so you guys can kind of hear the comparison.
Strange as it was before. Grooving in, can you see us holding on? Grooving in, bound to bring some pressure in. Can unwind from all the trouble and hiding. So grooving in, won't you show us how you dance? Strange as it was before. Strange as it was before.
Okay, so we're really trying to kind of open up the mix. I'm gonna give you kind of a B back and forth from the reference to where I'm currently at, just so you guys can really hear the big differences. So I'm going to just bounce between this mix reference and my mix, okay? Here it is. Okay, so big key here is to just open everything up. Like, I want it to sound like, yo, you just took the blankets off your ears. Like you were wearing earplugs like for a little while during the show, etc. And you kind of like took those earplugs off and you're like, oh shit, there's the band. There, I can hear what he's saying. It feels open. It feels more deep. It feels more wide. It's more spacious. You know what I mean? So that's really the whole idea of mixing and mastering, right? It's making more excitement happen. It's making more punch happen, more balance happen, taking the sheath off, if you will. So let's go through some of the things that I've done so far with the mix. And if you guys have any questions along the way, please ask any questions. It's all good. Like I'm here to answer any questions you got. I'm going to join the group for a year or so. Yeah, which group you talking about? What's up, Hondo? How you doing? Yeah, so it has a lot to do with like finding the record, right? And making sure that everything's heard. Like, for example, there's something about this intro that I was like, yo, this, like when I heard the reference, I'm like, I'm missing so many elements. So here's the reference on just the intro, and I'll play back to back what I've done and where the reference was, just so you can hear like, wow, where were all those elements before? So we're trying to like show like, look at all this stuff that you weren't hearing before, right? Like you weren't hearing those things because they were all being masked by a bunch of low and low mids. Okay. So really, really important that, that you start to unmask things. Okay. In your mix, unmasking things is everything, right? Like you could get the same impact, the same loudness, the same everything if you just get things out of the way of themselves. And you could do that a lot of ways. You could use EQ, you could use panning, you could use depth, you could use top to bottom, you could use width, right? You could use a lot of things to get other things out of the way of themselves, okay? So what I did here is I got the kick drum. I'm just going to show you just the drums right now because the drums are really important to this track, obviously. This is literally just the kick and snare and the drum room mics. Okay, so these drums, they take up tons of space, right? So in order to really like make sure that these drums aren't taking up a ton of space, I've gone and I've carved quite a bit out of the drum rooms. So drum room, this EQ, let's just take the EQ off these two EQs, because I'm using two EQs to kind of really trim out this fat and the high end and the really bottom stuff, because it's just not even needed in a drum room mic. Like, why would you have anything under 45 hertz? It makes no sense. Like, that's just the room's just gonna rumble, right? And then everything gets congested. So I cleared out all that. So let's just hear that without the EQ, and you'll hear like all this rumbling starts coming in.
Can you see us holding on? Proving that
So drums are really, really important. They kind of set the, when you're mixing rock, blues, metal, punk rock, literally anything that relies on kind of an acoustic drum kit, you really set the whole like sound of the record and the depth in the room and the dimension from the drums. Okay. So like that's always going to be the spatial, width, depth, everything, like the drums. Okay. So you have to understand that when you're mixing rock or blues or anything like this, the drums are everything, right? You're setting the stage. You're basically saying, here's the stage we're working off of. Okay, so then comes in this bass. I mean, there's an 808. There's all sorts of crazy shit in here that you have to make work, and it really doesn't work. I don't think it's the best arrangement. And, like no bad vibes to anyone. That's why you hire a mix engineer, so they can kind of make sense of your arrangement that may not be the best. So here's a bass, a sub bass, and if I just show you what I got, it would just be this, right? This would be like the sub bass by itself. So it has like, it's really not even a great sub bass. It's just like a really not very good sub bass, and you could tell it's already been filtered out because I'll turn on my EQ, and I just got rid of like everything below 20. There's no reason to have a bunch of crazy shit down here at like 20 hertz to 10 hertz to 8 hertz. Nobody's going to hear that. No one's going to feel that. You really need to just save that voltage so that you can make the record loud enough and proud enough without it starting to choke out the limiter and everything, right? So you'll see kind of like what they did with this sub bass when you just look at the Pro Q3. Right, it's just not colorful. It's very, very bland, very boring. It's just kind of like playing a bass note, you know what I mean? So that is something that I'm of course going to struggle with. It's just going to be hard to make that musical, because it's just it's just like there, nothing special about it. Okay, so what I did is I duplicated it so that I can get something to cut through the speakers, and this is like a ton of plugins for doing something so basic, but Pro Q3, Magma BB tubes, and then I filtered out the middle, used some noise, some noise on top of it, and then some H3000 to kind of like spread it stereo. And this is just so that it cuts on smaller speakers, and that's what this sounds like. And that's just going to help you go like, oh, there's a bass note in there and I hear it and it sounds good, right? Sorry, I'm having like weird clicks and pops and weird stuff going on. Let me see if I could do this. And then the track spacer is here for the kick drum, okay? So the kick drum and the track spacer is just kind of ducking this area when the kick drum hits. So bus 1, it's coming in on the side chain. And if I go up to the kick mic, I have this bus 1 sending Foley from the kick mic. And that's just going to kind of like duck those frequencies every time the kick drum hits on the bass, okay? So you'll see it here. So really, really basic, to make sure that that kick drum still stands out and it really like has impact, because obviously this is very like drum driven track. Like there's no way around it. It's like blues rock, right? You know, it's just like all drums. So what I did here is I duplicated the kick drum and I used trigger 2, and I did just like a drum replacement on this. So this is just like a kick replacement, and then I blended it in with the original kick. Because that original kick is that like ticky clang, 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 clang. It didn't have any like it didn't have that big oomph to it. And with like blues rock, you need, especially a modern blues rock with 808s and sub bass and shit, like you need that like it needs that dark, deep, stompy kind of thing. So that's really the idea I had here. So that's these drums together, these two kicks. Okay, so then I did some transient shaping as well. So the big thing about the kick here is it had a lot of ring out, like a lot of sustain. And if I just played this kick without anything that I've added, no EQ, no compression, no transient shaping, it's just way too big. It takes up so much low mids. It's just like, it eats everything, right? So we have to make space. It's really important that you're making space in your mix. So here's what the kick was without anything. Okay, and another thing, toms. Toms take up so much energy when they hit, and especially these toms. Like this part just gets, it got way too crazy, so I did a ton of EQ on the toms. And reason being is because, like, look at this. This is almost 3 dB down from 160 out, and then this is sweeping all the way up to 50. But like, look at this, like, just listen to this tom without this EQ. It's too much. It's just like for no reason. Like there's nobody's gonna be like, oh, here it's so intense. Like all they're gonna hear is the limiter choking down on this huge tom hit. So it's really, really important that you sweep out and save a lot of voltage on that. So here's before and after with the EQ. Okay, so toms, like really, really important that you pay attention to how hard a tom is hitting. Is it helping the track? no, then why the fuck do you have it so loud, and why do you have it hitting so much in the 160 area, right? Like you're like having everything go goo 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 goo, like it's choking everything, okay? So you have to understand the loudest element and the most voltage is going to come from the low end. And a lot of people don't understand this about mixing. They think, oh no, I want that low end to be really loud. Yeah, you can't have everything loud in the low end. So you can easily make up a lot of voltage by letting something else take over. Okay, so you got a kick drum, you got a tom, you got, even the snare has like 200, 250 hertz in it, right? So there's just a lot of like, and then he's got these big hits in here, and there's all these things just stacking on top of themselves. That doesn't make anything bigger, right? It makes it smaller because those things are going to hit, and they're going to hit all this processing that's happening on the drum mix, the drum master. It's going to happen on the master augs. You're going to rely on those things. They're going to choke down on everything. And what ends up happening is it's going to trigger limiters, and it's going to keep pulling down on stuff, which pulls down on everything. It pulls down on the top end, the high end, the mids, the low end, the sub frequencies. It pulls down on everything. And it makes your track breathe and pump in a not so musical way. So just to go over this, you have a kick drum doing this, you have a tom doing this, you have a big hit doing this, right? So all these things together, like they stack up. So you got to be really careful with that low end. Okay, so not to mention, you also have this respace. So you have like all this low end information. It's like, what? You can't have all of that together. It doesn't work together. That's not how mixing works. You can't just keep stacking low end on top of low end on top of low end and imagine like you're going to get more impact. You have to decide what's going to take the low end, what's going to take the low mids, what's going to take the mid range, what's going to take the punch. And because there's no vocals there, you have a lot to work with, right? But like this respace, for example, the good thing is it's kind of tapering out here. But even the respace, like look at this. This is all from 20 hertz to 280, 300 hertz. Like that's a lot of low mid information. And what you hear in the reference mix, when you solo the reference mix, you hear that that's the issue with the mix, is that there's all this low buildup, sub frequencies, and it just turns into a big, it's like, oh my God. Like that just doesn't sound as impactful as this does. Right, because you want that excitement, and excitement happens in the mid-range. It happens in the high end. It doesn't happen in the low. Okay, so the low is a feel. It's like how things feel. It's like the weight, right? And the weight of the track is really important. It's important that you have the low weight and the high, you know, all the way up and down, and you have the width, and you have the depth, and you have all this stuff like start to work together. But you got to be really careful with what's taking that. And that's really, really important to mixing is just making sure that you're not letting too many things take up too much room, if that makes sense. Okay, so that's what I'm doing. I'm really like sweeping a lot of stuff out. Drum, snare, EQ, that's it. There's no compression on this. All it has is like a parallel compression that I was sending, and I actually turned it off because I was like, the snare is like already really raucous. It's really big. Okay. Drum kick, EQ, little R comp, a little transient master, killing the sustain a little bit. Okay, and then that's sending to a track spacer, and that's sending to parallel compression. Drum parallel compression, this is really just working with the kicks. So drum parallel from this kick duplicate is not being sent. It's just from this kick, okay? And you're hitting the API 2500, which is just giving it a little bit more thud. It's giving it a little more punch, a little more pillow, which I like. That's really important to this kind of track. Yeah, and then everything else, like, I'm not doing a whole lot. Like, here's the EQ on the hi-hats. 5800 was like a little too peaky in my ears, so I turned it down. Drum toms, I already showed you that. Drum hit, this is really important. I keep this in the mid-range. I've killed a lot of this stuff, right? So I've taken this down almost 2 dB at 71. And that's because this hit, like, it's huge. And when they stack on top of them on each other, you're going to take up a lot of voltage. So that's what's going on there. Okay, and then we have the bass, sub bass, right? Just a little EQ taking out that. Bottom, and then track spacer for the kick drum. Side chaining, making some room, a little pocket for the kick drum. I showed you this other bass, it's so it cuts. Respace. This is like, I had a lot of like mid-range and stuff in there that I didn't need. So check it out. So that starts to compete with the organ. It starts to compete with the guitars. It starts to compete with the snare drum. It starts to compete with all these things that you wouldn't even think about, right? That's happening in the mid-range and the low mids. So that's what I did, is just kind of filter that out. And then we have the 808. 808, I just like literally filtered it down to 808, because when the 808 hits, you have to realize there's nothing, like there's so much shit going on that if you have any mid-range in this, you're going to be eating up the guitars, you're going to be eating up all sorts of stuff. So 808 right here with the guitar leads. I'm going to play these together. So the 808 should only be holding down that bottom sub, right? It should not be competing with the kick drum. It shouldn't be competing with anything else. So, and that's the thing, like people think that like, oh, things have to sound good soloed out. No, they don't. This is a mix, okay? So this 808 is only hitting when organ is playing, guitars are playing, rhythm guitar is playing, kick drum is playing, hi-hats, room mics, snare drums playing, literally everything. So why the fuck would that be taking up any mid-range? There's no need for an 808 to be taking up any of this. So if I turn this off, you hear just how much this 808 was eating. All right, so super important that you make space for all that. And that actually, that 808 could have more sub to it, I feel like. It could have more of like a rumble 40 hertz kind of vibe. But, you know, I want that to blend perfectly going into the sub bass. Let me restart Pro Tools real quick, because I just want to do a save as. This is acting a little funky. But you guys have any questions so far about the mix? The key is to open up everything. The key is to make this a record that sounds full and open and dynamic, and you know, take the blanket off of everything. Like, just really make it sound like a big record rather than a demo. And that's always going to be my like number one priority, is like, I want to make this a record, not a demo. So a lot of demos come through to me where people are like, yeah, this is the record, I've finished it. And you're like, this is what you finished? Like, this is not a record, right? So you really need experience to understand what a record sounds like and what it feels like. And you might understand, you might hear it compared to something else and go, there's something not right about it. I think that's usually why people hire mixing, mastering engineers, is because they go, there's something just not right about this. I don't know what it is, right? And that's fine. Like, that's a great time to hire someone that can take it to the next level. They can take it from like the best you can get it as a demo to like, yo, let's make this into a record that can play back to back in a Spotify playlist, and people are going to go, holy shit, that sounds better even than the other stuff. So that's my number one goal when I get a record. I want it to feel right. Okay. The feeling of the record is so much more important than the sound of the record. Okay, so like I don't want to fuck up the feel that they have. And some things that I have to be really careful of with this record is I don't want it to get too bombastic, right? So, meaning when you start mixing a record and you start opening it up, and the high end and the mids and the harmonics start to come out, and it starts to get wider and it starts to get more present, it can also sound a little too exciting when really it's supposed to be more chill, if that makes sense. So you might need to smooth things out and go, hold on, this is getting a little too exciting, right? So I constantly will bounce back to the mix reference and just double check. All right, let me see if I can fix this. This is driving me crazy. It's just like the playback is going, and I know it's the Ecamm bullshit, but I'm gonna switch back and forth from the Apollo. So you guys have any questions about like kind of clearing space for stuff? Because that's super important. I think when you're making a record, you have to realize like you want everything heard and felt in the way that it's supposed to be heard and felt. So sometimes like you don't want that guitar to be really like heard, but you want it to be felt as like a rhythm thing, right? Or maybe it's the organ. You want that organ to be kind of just like slipped in there with the sub bass, and you want it to be a layer of something, right? And then some people might want it to be really heard. Like I want to really hear that organ. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of things to think about as you're mixing. But let's reopen this. It's so hard to stream when you're like so far into the mix that you're this deep, because the like Ecamm and the Pro Tools and stuff just, they don't really work together very well. Like they start to get really weird. So let's try this. I'm just going to switch this back and forth. But yeah, the track actually reminds me, it's really weird. It's like a blend of like Black Keys, Modest Mouse. There's like a lot of different genres and different vibes going on in it. But overall, I feel like it just has like a really cool vibe. Like, groovy man. Before. Like his voice is cool too. Kind of Kings of Leon kind of vibe to the vocal, kind of Southern rock. So that's a really important part of being a great mix engineer as well, is you got to have a musical catalog. You can't be like, oh, all I listen to is trap music. Okay, now you're gonna mix a blues rock record. Like, sorry, you're gonna fuck that up. So you have to have that catalog. You have to understand where things sit in the specific genre and the style. And then you work with the artist. You know, the artist is gonna have their vision. Like, man, we were really going for this. And what I do constantly is I just make it sound exactly how I feel it sounds, like really great. And I kind of bring out the elements that I think are really cool in the record. And I send it back to the client, and I make sure they know, like, hey, this is my initial interpretation of the record. And I think this really helps it breathe. It's like, you know, this makes the record more exciting. And this is how I think it should sound, right? But then I make sure they know, like, you are absolutely like, let's work together to get it where you think it should sound as well. Because you're always going to have revisions. Sometimes you knock it out of the park and you send back a, you know, one pass mix master, and they're like, oh my God, this is fucking awesome. It sounds so good. But that's pretty rare, because, you know, you're kind of trying to get in the head of the artist, of the band, the rapper, whoever it is that you're working with. You're really trying to like figure out what do they want to sound like? Who do they want to be? And I always want them to sound like a star. I want them to sound like the biggest band in the world. You know what I mean? Like that you've never heard of. So that's always the intention when I'm mixing something. But it doesn't always come out that way for the artist, because the artist may have lived with this song for, months, maybe even years. So they might go like, oh, that's not how I was thinking it should be. I think you made it too bright. I think you made it too this. Etc. So you got to kind of like go back and forth, and you kind of balance things out. And that's fine. That's how you should mix and master, and how you should work with people, because you got to get like that perspective of someone that's been doing this for, 20 something years, like professionally, had success, and has, the actually accolades and like things that have proven like, yo, I've done this for artists that are much bigger, and like gotten records out there that are bigger, and helped them succeed. And a lot of artists have never done that. Right. So they're like, oh, I mix myself, I master myself. It's like, yeah, but you don't have anything, right? You got a few thousand streams on your songs. You don't have a career. You've never made money with this. You've never booked shows from your records. Like, you have to really kind of put your faith into the process of the professionals. And I recommend it to everybody. Like, you should always try and work with professionals. It's going to take your reach, and it's going to elevate it always. So even if you just learn a couple things about yourself, or what you don't like, oh, I didn't like working with that guy or this girl because they did this and I didn't agree with this, or whatever. Okay, cool. Now you know, right? So with the lead vocal, I want to go through this real quick, because this is really important. EQ, this thing had a lot of crazy peaky kind of stuff going on, which I don't typically do, but these are dynamic EQs. So these are moves where if too much of 2400 hits, it's going to tuck it down, and same thing of 45. And then I take the top off a little bit of this, because you don't need all the shiny, sparkly top end in a blues rock vocal. Actually, you don't want that. Save that for like super pop shit, right? And then the tubes, this is just such a great plugin. I just did a plugin of the week on it, but it's just so fucking good. So I've been using it like crazy. So I'm just driving it a little bit, getting that vocal to sound a little bit more special. And then RVox, one of my favorite compressors ever, and the Pro DS, favorite de-esser in the world, right? Like, just so good. And then I'm sending to some fattening and some vocal verb, some vintage vocal verb, okay? So I'll show you what the fattening bus is, and the vocal verb and all that stuff. So vintage vocal verb is right here. It's a little EQ, get rid of like the bottom. It's not really getting rid of, it's just tucking it way down from 230 on. And then the top, I don't want that either. Because vintage means, to me, it means not a whole lot of pristine highs, right? And then I have the space modulator, which kind of like widens it out and makes it kind of funky. And then the AKG, which is just a beautiful BX20 spring reverb. Doesn't even sound like a spring. It just kind of puts a vibe around things, which is awesome. And then the Pro Q3, which is just getting rid of a lot of stuff that I don't need after the reverb hits, okay? So that's that. And then we have some fattening. The fattening bus is R-Comp, Doubler, Q4, and S1 Imager, okay? We're just kind of like doubling. We're just giving it some thickness and some width in the vocal. Everything goes to the all Vox, and the all Vox ends up here, okay? So that all Vox has some stuff on it, just kind of tidying up here, Sooth 2, getting rid of some peaky stuff, CLA vocals, because I love the slap on this, and this really adds a ton of vibe. A little bit more widening on that. And then the spaced out, which I'll show you what I do with this. So the spaced out is really cool, because now I can take this and I can sort of automate different throws and stuff. So check this out.
Strange as it was before.
So this is really, really important to my workflow, is just like having things move and breathe. And the track has to feel alive. It can't feel like everything's stagnant. Like, oh, I got it set. There's the mix. That's not a mix, okay? If you ever work with someone that doesn't automate, doesn't like throw the spices in there and like make things move, and like, you know, the chorus comes up in volume and then it goes back down to the bridge and there's like filtering happening, and like the track has to be super exciting, right? So in Pro Tools, you can hold down Control Option Command and you could click anything, and you can open up plugin dialog and you could turn that thing into automation. So for some reason, I don't even see it here, which is weird, but the spaced out, like it should be like joystick or XY. So let's look for that. Space active Y with blah, blah, blah. Modulation effects, maybe? I don't know. Maybe it's the mix. Yeah, I think it's the mix. Okay, so we'll pop on here and we could just grab a couple things. Like, let's grab the mix and the effects. We'll add these on spaced out and we'll say okay. And then what we can do is we could just turn this into latch or touch latch, whatever you want to do. Maybe touch would be best, because if you touch, you can like pull it up and then let go and it'll go back, which is really cool for like throws and stuff. And we'll just kind of automate this as we go, right? So let's just do a little pass here.
Strange as it was before. Grooving there, can you see us holding on? Grooving there, won't you bring some fresh air? Then unwind from all of the trouble I am.
Okay, I'm not liking this latch because it's like trying so hard to go back. So let's do touch or latch. I'm sorry, not touch. Okay, so touch will like, it's like trying constantly to come back, which pisses me off. And then you can also open up the lane here so you can really see it, like the dry wet. And you can see all the little automation I did, right? So let's go back to where the vocals first come in. And I think it's this is the pass right here, right? And we'll just kind of make this move and make this breathe and make this, you know, have some vibe to it. So let's try it out.
Strange as it was before. Grooving there, can you see us holding on? Grooving there, won't you bring some fresh air? Then unwind from all of the trouble I am. So grooving there, won't you show us how you dare? Strange as it was before. Strange as it was before. Strange as it was before. Strange as it was before.
So really, really cool. And now you can kind of like go tidy it up, but let's just turn it to read and just so you can kind of see what I'm doing. So this is going to be like the delays and the echoes, and then this is going to be like the reverb, right? So what I can do is I can throw it into the reverb, or I can throw it into the delay, or I could throw it into a mixture of both. And that's why you see me kind of panning that XY pad over and stuff, which really just gives it so much movement, right? So all these little throws now become like this really beautiful dance with the vocals. And remember, this is on the all vocals, so like all the vocals are going to this and they're doing all this like interesting movement and texture. And then of course I could turn these down, I can like lessen them, I can go into spaced out, and I could even turn, you know, like maybe take the you know, any of this, the dimension, the intensity of this, like the feedback, all that stuff. I could even just like adjust those parameters instead of adjusting how wet I'm going with it, right? So let's just like play that back and see what it did.
Strange as it was before.
Okay, and then I'm just going to bounce back to the reference, and you could just hear how different and how much more exciting the mix is becoming compared to the reference. And also make sure we're not going off basis, right? Right, so what I do is like I kind of like go exaggerate shit and make like all these effects and stuff happen, and then I just back off all of them in the final mix, right? And just kind of smooth them out and put them back into the mix, and then let the client go, hey, that's dope, that's super dope, I love what you did there, but let's take that one out, let's take that one out, right? Because that's going to happen. Like, it's just part of the game. So you constantly want to be part of making the record. That's why mixing engineers, I personally think, should be getting percentage points on records, right? Because like an upfront fee is like one thing, right? Okay, cool, here's your upfront fee for mixing and mastering it. But once we start making the record, once we start actually producing on the record, which I think of this stuff as like production, I think that's when you should be like, hey, you know, you really made this a record. Like, I want to give you a point on the master, or I want to give you, you know, a little bit of writing or something, right? So something to consider when you're working with a mixing engineer that you really love. Like, if you work with someone that like really makes your record go from here to like here, you go, hold on, I need to keep this person around, right? Because they're really a big part of my sound. Okay, so that's kind of like the idea of automation. You know, and then you can always go in here and you can like tuck things back, or you could delete stuff like, oh, I don't really like this one. I mean, I love it. I think it's super dope. It adds so much to the record, so much more excitement, right? Because you have all these guitars noodling and stuff, and they kind of fall back to in the back of your mind. Like, you don't hear it. Like, it's almost kind of obnoxious, right? Because you're like, just play a groove so you can have the singer play. Like, why is there so much soloing going on, right? Like, that's one part of this record that I just, that kind of irks me a little bit. I'm like, you don't need all that, right? That's crazy. Like, chill out. Another thing I want to do is I want to make this kind of sound move a little bit more, because I think this makes it sound really modern, and I'll play it for you. So that's a really cool sound that I did not hear in the reference. Like, here, let's play the beginning of this so you guys can really hear the intro. And like, it's tucked in here so deep. It's like, why didn't you bring that out? That's really cool. Like, where is it, right? So what I did is I kind of like try to make that dance a little bit in the mix. Right, and that's just like a testament to movement and to automation, right? So another thing we could do here is just kind of make this move a little bit. Same thing I'm doing here, where I'm like kind of bringing the filter up and down, and that's all this is this guy right here, right? Like I'm pulling this up and down. So now on this part, what I could do is I can start to automate this a little bit as well, and just kind of make it move. So you kind of go, oh, what is that? It like catches your ear and it kind of moves through the track, right? That's really what I'm trying to do. Okay, so let's go to Latch and let's just hit play and let's write some stuff.
Groovy man, can you see us holding on? Groovy man, won't you breathe some fresh air? Then unwind from all the trouble I am. So groovy man, won't you show us how you dare? Find as it was before.
All right, there you go. So now we got a little movement there. I'm just going to turn this back to read. And this is just going to be kind of swimming up and down in here, right? And then I also want to think, like, what should really be taking over here, right? Like, is it the guitars? The vocal comes in, right? So we don't want too much of anything else. Like, just maybe rhythm guitars, like, let the bass. This organ might be too much right here, right? So check this out.
Can you see us? Groovy man.
Like, it's just like, you're not even hearing it. You know what I mean? Like, why the organ? Like, what's it doing? You know what I mean? So on that part, I might have like the organ get really small. Big reason is because this low end stuff could be combating with vocals, the sub bass and the bass that's going on, the kick drum, all this other stuff that it's eating up, right? So right here, I might want to automate this up to, 200, 300, even 500, right? And just kind of like find a place for it. So that's when this bass sub comes in, right? So when the sub bass comes in, we're going to start to automate the organ EQ. So we just have like a little sliver of the organ. So right in here, around bar 13, 14, right? So let's go here and again, just Control Option Command, and we'll click and we'll go open automation and we'll add that. And then we can open this lane here on the organ and we can see what we're doing here. And then we'll go to touch or latch, whatever. I think latch is going to be better for this. And then we'll just latch it up where it starts to feel right. And we're just going to get it out of the way of the lows and the low mids.
Groovy man, can you see us holding on? Groovy man, won't you breathe some fresh air? Then unwind from all the trouble.
Right, so we just like kind of like make more room, groovy man. Like that's the big thing, right? It's blues. Blues is gonna have that repetitive phrase, so that's what we're gonna do is we're just gonna kind of make room for that little area. Another thing is you have these oohs in the vocals, which I really want to make sound way more interesting, and I want you to hear these because these are cool. Now, of course, what is eating those frequencies up? Electric guitar. Pretty obvious, right? So right away, if you put these together, it's almost like these oohs disappear when the guitar is playing, right? So let's check this out. So I'm just going to show you the masking. So here's the guitars and the oohs together. Like perfect example of what masking is, right? And what it's doing. It's like, yeah, like why even have those in there when you have electric guitars going like all over the same frequency? It's literally bad arrangement. Okay. So you have to see what you can do with this. Like what's more important? Is the guitar more important or is the oohs more important? It's like, it's hard to say, right? Like you have to make a decision as a mixing engineer, which then you're getting into production. You're like really starting to make decisions for the artist and for the record. So what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and send this to a bus, right? I'm going to go like bus 5, 6, fine, right? Okay, 100% to that. Now, bus 5, 6 isn't going anywhere. I don't have like a return bus, okay? So on the guitars, what I have is those going to an instrument mix bus. Instead, let's take these guitars to a guitar bus. So let's just go new track, and we'll make a stereo augs, and we'll call this guitar buses. All right? And then that guitar bus would then go to the instrument mix bus, because that's where we want all of our instruments to end up. Now on this guitar mix bus, we can, first of all, we can clean all the guitars up a little bit, right? By using EQ and stuff. Sometimes I'll turn an EQ on just to see a little bit of what's going on, right? So you can play this. Okay, so you get like a sense of what's going on. It's a lot of mid-range, a lot of highs, 2K, 4K kind of stuff. That's typically where electric guitars are going to be anyway. Now, if I take this and I bring this Pro Q3 down here, I'm just showing this to you guys because I think maybe it's a little bit of a cheat code to help you out and understand masking a little bit better, right? So I'm just going to keep, I'll keep these together, like the vocal harmony and the Pro Q3 for the guitar bus, okay? So if I hit this little arrow target button, I can show both of these, right? So here we go. So now I got these back to back. Now pay attention to the fact that they're taking up the exact same frequency range. So one thing that's cool about the vocals that is that they're kind of like in this area where it's kind of the low mids, which is something that you can really kind of chisel out in the guitars a little bit more, right? Because the guitars, I like the high end of the guitar. It's like that's the spank and the grit and the the attitude is in the 4K, the 3K area of the guitars. But in this, you want that to be like more deep. Right? And the depth is coming from that 300, 500 area, right? And you'll even see the fundamental frequency right here. So 500 to 300. Really, really easy, right? And I'm just showing this to you instead of like just using my ears, just so you guys can see a visual representation of what I'm hearing. So I'm going to get rid of those EQs. I don't need those. All right. Guitar bus, don't need that EQ either. We'll just get rid of that. Okay. Now on the guitar bus, because we sent to bus 5, 6, what we're going to do is we're going to open up a Waves Factory, just like track spacer. You could use a dynamic EQ for this. You could use Pro Q3. You could use whatever. It doesn't matter what you use. Everything that I'm showing you is the same exact same idea. So track spacer. Now what we can do is we can bring this up to that area, right? So let's go like 300, like 280 or so, and then we'll go all the way down to about 600, 630. Okay. Now we have this little area where the ooh can really duck the guitars, and the oohs can come out in those frequencies. Okay. And I'm going to make this a little bit quicker on the attack, so we can really kind of get that in there, and the release a little bit quicker as well. Now we have a little ducking action where the ooh can come out a little bit more. And we might widen this up. This might be ridiculous that we're only doing the fundamental of it, but you'll see what I'm saying. Okay, key part of this obviously is you have to put on the key input bus 5 or 6, right? Because this is coming from bus 5, 6. So, and you don't need to do this. You can also go down here into the buses, and you can do, you could see the bus 5 or bus 6, right? Mono. So you can do a mono send. Okay, so now that's bus 5. That's coming in bus 5. Bam. Okay. So now that's seeing the key input as what we should be using to target. See how we start to make space for that ooh, right? Now it's like ooh, but this is where you have to use your, you know, like you got to realize what you're trying to do. Like, do you really care about those oohs that much, or are you think the guitar is like more important, right? So you don't want that guitar to sound like it's getting ducked really heavy too when those oohs come in. So I just do like very little of this, right? Like maybe bring this way down. And then you can do stuff like another amazing plugin from Waves Factory is Spectre, right? So on those oohs, we can go find that area. For example, like if it's down here in the 300 area, I think it was like 3 to 500, right? We can go down here and we can bring this up like around the, 370 or something. And we can start to distort this a little bit, right? So I'll show you what this does. It's really, really beautiful too. So that's pretty dope, right? Like, I think that kind of vibe is really fun. And then also, like, if you want to just like make it more interesting, swimmy, like from left to right sort of thing, you could try some stuff like that, right? You know, there's all sorts of stuff you can do with this. I'm going to try just throwing the Valhalla, the space modulator on it. Even just as this preset, like you open it up, it sounds really damn good. And this might just make it a little more wide and a little more kind of ghostly. And, you know, there's a little bit of trippiness to this track, and I want to kind of accentuate that. All right, that's all the time I got today to be live streaming this. But hopefully you guys got a lot out of this. I mean, I just kind of like working on the thing and like putting it together, trying to beat the rough, man. Like really trying to make this exciting. I want people to hear it and be like, "Yo, this is dope! Like this is fun. There's a lot of movement, a lot of textures, a lot of stuff going on." But anyway. You guys, if you have any questions at all, just drop them on the, comment on the live and, I'll try to get to the questions. Hopefully that was really helpful. Hey, thanks for coming through, Isomatic. Thanks, Brian. Yeah, it's a good song. I'm liking it too. I'm digging it more and more the more I dig into it. All right, you guys, take care. Have a good Tuesday.